So my brothers and my sisters, as we embrace this urgency of creating the beloved community, now is the time to be loved. Love means understanding redemptive goodwill toward all which seeks nothing in return. So be loved by implementing the demands of justice to eliminate the school to prison pipeline that has so many black children entrapped. Be loved by correcting voting policies that seek to suppress the votes of millions of black and brown people. Be loved and implement the demands of justice by transforming a society that is disproportionately violent toward black lives, including black transgendered lives and indigenous lives. Be loved and correct false narratives and economic policies that continue to divide and pit poor and working class black and white people against each other. Be loved and implement demands of justice where systems and structures are deconstructed and lead the way of living in community that reimagines just, humane, equitable, and sustainable policies, practices, and behaviors. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them who hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and abuse you. Be loved and do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with our God.
Good morning. Welcome to our Students with King Civil Rights panel discussion. Today's talk is designed for you, the students, that you can ask all the questions that you want to of our panelists. Welcome to this Black History Experience. We want this to be active and we want you to enjoy yourself. But I'm not going to talk anymore. I would like to introduce you to our moderator for today's conversation, a former television host and producer, and also she currently serves as Director of Interfaith Community Initiative, Miss Angela Rice.
Good morning. Good morning. I am so excited to be here this morning and to join in with all of you as we celebrate Black History Month, but we also do this by learning a lot about what we can do to continue to advance the ideas of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So we are here to talk about nonviolence. We're here to talk to a civil rights activist who is continuing to do the work. So we're excited that you're here and you're taking time. And so we want you to know, please listen and then prepare to ask your questions. And then we'll engage everyone so that we can get the most out of this session. I have been with this program a number of times, and I can tell you that it is quite engaging. And don't be shy. Ask what you need to ask. Ask what is concerning you. So we're going to get ready to look at our speaker for today, Mr. Charles Alphin, and you're going to find him very interesting. And as we look at what is happening in our society today, I think he'll be able to respond to some of those questions that we have, some of those concerns that we have, not only as adults, but also as children, those who are in school. So let's take a moment to listen to these ideas about Charles Alphin.
Welcome to our Students with King Nonviolence Spotlight Series. Today we are going to tell you about an amazing civil rights leader who helped change the world. When you hear his awesome story, it will hopefully spark something in you to make a difference and make your community better for everybody. Our spotlight person is
Mr. Charles L. Alphin Sr. He served as a police officer for over 26 years in the St. Louis City Police Department, St. Louis, Missouri. During his police career, he served as a patrol officer, detective, juvenile officer, sergeant, platoon lieutenant, and captain. Serving in the rank of captain the last 10 years of his career, he was commander of homicide and rape and child abuse, and a district commander. And he retired as commander of vice narcotics. In 1992, after retirement from the St. Louis City Police Department and at the request of Mrs. Coretta Scott King, Captain Alphin and his wife moved to Atlanta to work at the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. What an honor! Mrs. Coretta Scott King asked him to work with her. He worked as a trainer in Kingian nonviolence, and in 1994 was promoted to Director of Education and Training for the King Center. In 1996, he retired from the King Center. He has been privileged to train both nationally and internationally in Kingian nonviolence. He has trained law enforcement officers, at-risk and gang youth, educators, elementary, secondary, and college students, professors, community leaders, clergy, and correctional officers. He sure did, and if Mr. Alphin can do all of this, you can too. Presently, he serves as senior trainer for the King Center in Atlanta, Georgia. He also is a conference director and a member of the Global Nonviolence Conference Series.
Let's now welcome Mr. Charles L. Alphin Sr., who's going to talk to us about his life in civil rights, his life as a police officer. But first, Mr. Alphin, I want to find out what inspired you as a young person growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, to become a police officer. Was that a dream of yours?
No, I didn't like the police when I was coming up, Angela, and welcome to everybody here. Just excited to have a dialogue with you. But when I was coming up, the police were very brutal to the Black community and had power. And I've been beaten a lot by the police officers in St. Louis, so I didn't really like the police. As I came back from the service and looking for a job, they advertised the police were hiring. And I had 2 children, Angela, and I went down and joined the police department. But my experience shaped my attitude about working with people. I just promised never to abuse people because I had been abused by the police. So I joined it to really help people and to share that police officers are human and that you don't have to be violent or abusive to people that you arrest. And so I wanted to set a model for police officers, and that's one of the reasons I joined.
Yeah, and I heard a story about you at 9 years old. You had an encounter with the police officers, and I'm sure that shaped some of how you saw police officers at that time.
Yes, I read or heard on the news that Blacks could swim in a pool in St. Louis, Missouri. And I rode my bike. It was further than my mother would let me go, so I disobeyed my mother and went to the pool. And when I got there, white people, mostly whites and police, were lined the pool to make sure Blacks could not get into the pool. And they beat me with sticks and took my bicycle. And as I tried to run, they tried to hang me with a rope. And I became very upset and angry because I was 9 years old and didn't understand why white people would hate me so much, and they didn't even know me. And that just put a vision in my mind that I was getting very angry with people. And I was African-American, angry in the United States of America because not only the way they treated me, but the way they treated my mother and father.
So, something in me says that, as you said before, that you wanted that experience to be different for other people. And, and I'm thinking about when I was young and we were young, did we have the talk? What was the talk? We hear a lot today about the talk where parents talk to their children about how to encounter or how to behave during an encounter with a police officer.
Yeah.
But I remember as a child, I was very innocent. I thought officers were officer friendly.
Well, Angela, we used to, and I joined the police department in '65, and we were focusing on community policing. So we actually had a name badge that said friendly. So the young people in school, when they see us, they would call us officer friendly. And that would indicate that we were not their enemy, and that if they had a problem, come to us and we would make sure they were safe. So it was an outreach to the community. And that's one of the problems today is that officers are working so hard and they're getting so many calls for service. They don't have time to take time and talk to the school children, all the people in the community. And that has caused a very large polarization and dislike for both, not only the police, but also the community, because they don't communicate. We used to have walking, you remember, Angela, I'm not sure how old you, but I remember, but we used to have walking police, beat police. And they would walk in the stores and share with people in the stores, the people in the community, and they knew all the children in the community. So that has changed because our urban cities have grown, and the calls for service to police officers have tripled or quadrupled.
And so I'm just thinking about the incident or the tragedy that happened in Memphis recently with the young police officers who brutally beat this man to death. And one of the things that I read in the newspaper was that there was such a lack of training and there's such a lack of interest in people becoming, so a lot of counties and a lot of cities are now crying for police officers. And so the persons that often show up aren't the best trained or have the best backgrounds in terms of doing this work.
Yeah, and I teach police officers, and we use these same principles that Dr. King advocated in policing. You can use them, they're universal, so you can use them all the time. But what's happening in policing is that police officers need strong supervision because they have the power to kill and to arrest, take your freedom away. In a democracy, that's a very high priority when they can take your freedom away or kill you. So therefore, they need strong supervision. And if you don't have that, then you're going to have like we had in Memphis, because I am disgusted with what the officers did in Memphis. I'm just embarrassed. They've really disgraced the professional police officers. They've set us back 10 or 15 years as far as community involvement. So I'm very disgusted with that, and that should never happen. But it happens because you don't have supervisors on the scene to stop that. Also, the department has to have what we call a red flag or early warning system where officers give actions and their involvement with public where they need help. And if you're a supervisor, you can keep track of that like I did and begin to pull those officers off the streets and get them some help. And if they don't respond to help, I've had to get rid of them because some people just shouldn't be police officers because they don't know how to handle power. So it takes a lot of supervision within the ranks. It takes you being transparent to the public and not covering up. When I had some serious homicide shootings, I would tell the public that I'm not going to cover up and I'll give you the information in a couple of days. So you can't cover up information. And we've got to examine within the police department how we can be more transparent with the public. And also the public needs to make sure they inspect what they expect. If they expect good policing, they should go to the police meetings, they should go to their police stations, and they should demand that when you're in my neighborhood, we expect you to act a certain way. So we have to work on both sides because it's a very complicated problem.
I want to take a moment just to encourage our students to put their questions in the chat that you would like me to present to Mr. Alphin so we can continue the conversation with your questions. One of the things I want to find out is how did you transition? When we think of policing, we think of the man with the gun and we think of the gun as related to violence. And here is someone who spent all of his years, most of his career in policing. And so now he's working on, I guess, on the other side, nonviolence. So well, how did that transition come about?
Well, it helped me because I understand now, as Dr. King taught, there are always alternatives to violence. When you are involved in violence, that's normally your choice. So you have alternatives. And Gandhi said, you always have alternatives. So therefore, I didn't know anything else but to fight. And I was coming in the neighborhoods of St. Louis. We had to fight to school and fight home. I love to fight, Angela. I thought fighting solved things, but I learned that the more I fought, the more I had to fight. And it wasn't solving anything. So I did that until my son was in high school and on a football team. And it was a school that we had just desegregated, and they were not being fair to the academics of the students in school. And I was upset. I was a sergeant, and I couldn't go to that school district and do any violence. So I met Dr. Bernard Lafayette, And he was with Dr. King 5 hours before he was assassinated. He was Dr. King's one of the lieutenants, and he was in St. Louis, and he led me in how to solve that problem with the school district. And after we solved it through nonviolence, and he took me on a tour to the Freedom Rides in 1981. And I met Honorable Andrew Young and John Lewis and C.T. Vivian, Dorothy Cotton, Diane Nash. Because Dr. Lafayette knew all these people, and I didn't know much about the civil rights movement. And we spent 8 days looking at how the system had changed, how nonviolence had changed the United States. And then in Montgomery, Mrs. King came, and that's where I met her in 1981. So I was exposed, I think, through divine order to meet Dr. Lafayette, who introduced me to all those living legends. And they taught me, my biggest question was, how do you change all this in the South? And you didn't beat anybody, you didn't shoot anybody. I was fascinated, Angela. So I wanted to find out everything that they knew so I could begin to change and make some serious change and not just have temporary change through violence.
So tell me, what was, I know when we go from one thing to another, sometimes our heart has to be changed towards different ideas. So how will you change, like, inside,
Well, that's an excellent question, because the first thing nonviolence, Dr. King's philosophy, changes is you. You can't begin to change your community or your relationships with your peers or your siblings until you change. So therefore, you have to work on self. You have to, after you learn the philosophy, which I went to India, studied Gandhi, and came back with Dr. King and all those legends. But I had to get myself together. I had to make sure, what part do I play with my prejudice, my biases, and what part do I play in the conflict? For instance, if you're in school, you're having a discussion with your parents or your siblings, and there's a conflict, Dr. King always asked himself, what part do I play in it? What part did I not do or do? So therefore, it's like Michael Jordan says, the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror. You have to look inside yourself, because when you begin to change, you have to change yourself. And if you don't change yourself, you're really not going to be able to stick to what you believe. So once you get it in you, in your knower, that you understand it, and this is your goal in nonviolence, is not to violate people, then you will adhere to that. And it takes practice. So what I did, Angela, I practiced with my mother and my father and my household, the people I said I love, my siblings, because sometimes we're more violent with people we say we love, through the way we talk, our tongue. Your tongue is the most dangerous weapon, I think, that you have, because your tongue can cause people to hate you and want to kill you. So first of all, I went in with my family, and I began to look at how violent I was to my siblings, my friends, my mother and father, how I talked to them. And I had to change that. And that's why in nonviolence, we say it begins with you. And you have to go inside yourself and understand and believe what this philosophy is, and then use it 365 days a year. That's why we call it NV365. That's Nonviolent 365. It's a way of life. It's the way you live. It's life skills.
Well, we have a question from one of our students, and I just want to continue to encourage all of you to use the comment section to ask a question. So the comment section is there for you to put your question in. So let's see what our question is from our students. And I think it's really important that this message, and I know you agree with this, that we need to have this message of nonviolence, there from the time we come into this world,
Absolutely.
So that we grow up with a consciousness of nonviolence.
Yes, violence is a learned behavior. If it's learned, it can be unlearned.
Yeah, and I think about all of the bullying that happens in school.
Yes.
I was bullied when I was in school, and I know how it affects you. It affects your self-esteem. It affects how you behave in your classrooms. And it really, it's terrifying for children who are bullied. And so learning strategies, how to protect yourself when you're bullied, I think is also a product of that nonviolence training.
And we teach that in our training with young people. How do you respond to bullying, and how do you not become a part of the problem? Because you can become a part of the problem in the bullying. So we teach you nonviolent skills of how to respond to the bullying. So that's very, very important, because that bullying, a lot of young people commit suicide and just stop going to school or have their whole life change because of bullying. So yes, but it takes a whole school. It takes the culture of the school to help with that, and we teach young people how they can do that with the help of their teachers and the principals, etc.
We have a question from Arnetta Murray. She's not a student, but she's asking a question.
Okay.
And the question is, how can teens help? How can teens help?
Wow, that's an excellent question, because in the civil rights movement, the youth were normally out front in everything that they did. In fact, as I travel around the world, no country I taught in where the young people were not active in the movement. So therefore, that's why I'm glad that the King Center and Mr. Bullock set this up and you agreed to help facilitate this, because they are so important. They're 100% of our future. And I would be very frank with you, Angela. We as adults, we've messed this world up. I was in the Soviet Union years ago, and they have missiles pointed at us that can destroy the world 10 times. We have nuclear weapons. We have more fighting this century than we have in any other century. So we need these young people to think through our problems and apply the philosophy of nonviolence to make sure that we don't destroy each other, as Dr. King said. So what can you do? Number one, you can first of all learn what this is by understanding how Dr. King and Gandhi and other people framed this. Nonviolence is not the opposite of violence. It's to cure the violence. And nonviolence is never spelled with a hyphen. It's a philosophy, a methodology. So once you learn what it is, then you and your teenager, you can begin to apply it with the way you talk to your siblings, your mother, your family, your friends. And then after you learn it, then what we call a training of trainers will teach you how to get a critical mass in your school to work on a problem to enhance or enrich your school. So the whole school works on that problem, and it begins to expand to the community. So you are very important, because you all have the energy, and you all will lead. You all will lead the older people. I didn't say older people, Angela. You all will lead them, because you all have issues that will affect your life. So you're very, very important, and it takes the training first, and the King Center has those resources to support you.
Please use the comment section to ask a question at this time. I wanted to say, I remember being in the march to coming. I think Dr. Hosea Williams led that march. I guess it was in the 80s. And I remember, okay, I want to go on this march. And one of the things that I realized was how strategic the process is. You know, we were told to keep our eyes straight ahead. We were told to ignore any comments. We were told to, if we had to talk, to sing rather than talking, because that could also be seen as violent. So it showed me how intense this training was, you know, and I had to really work with myself as I'm marching, you know, just not to deter from the instructions I had been given.
Yes, and I was in that march, Angela, and also the police protected us. They had police and soldiers on every overpass and all the way down to Cummings. And the police protected us. The Klan was right behind the guard, and they had hoods on and gowns, you know, had little children in Klan uniforms. I was so shocked. But yes, and that's the whole strategy, is that you respond, but you respond not to win over the person, but to win the person over. And that's all the philosophy of Dr. King. And he developed it from Montgomery and continued all the way through all the movements.
And, you know, I was happy for the question that Miss Arnetta Murray gave about teenagers. And I also, your answer about how teenagers were a big part of the movement.
Absolutely.
A big part of the movement. So when we think about what can we do to change society, it doesn't mean that we have to be older or adults or whatever. We have that opportunity as young people, as teenagers, as middle school kids. We have an opportunity, once we learn this, to be able to share it and kind of direct others in our peer group.
Absolutely. And Rosa Parks in Montgomery, she had NAACP youth group. They had young people in Birmingham that over 3,000 were arrested, some as young as 8 years old. So yes, you're very important, and we need you. So I just thank you for that question, because without you, our future is in bad shape.
And yeah, I just got a comment from Sophia Grace that says that she's responsible for cleaning up this house. She says, "I'm here to be responsible and help clean up this mess." So what a wonderful idea, or something that she's gained from this conversation, that she has a responsibility. And we are seeing more and more of our young people speaking up, about climate control, about nonviolence. And never before, I think, have we seen it affect them to the degree that it's affecting them today. When I was a kid, and I'm sure when you were a kid too, we never worried about guns in school. We knew a fight might break out, but it was going to be a fist fight.
Fist fight.
Yes, and nobody was going to die at the end of it. And now we're having children in schools 6 years old. So, I mean, this message is so necessary today. So, another question related to all of this is, why is the political process, why is voting and being a part of that process so important to this whole nonviolent movement?
Oh, that's an excellent question, because Dr. King certainly understood that in a democracy, it's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Washington, D.C. does not run the United States. We send people there by our vote to represent us and our issues. So therefore, we have to understand how this system works. The system works with participation in voting. And you vote and send people to represent you in Washington. And when they don't represent you, whether it's Democrat or Republican, you bring them back home with love. So therefore, we have to understand the power of the vote. Because when Dr. King would demonstrate, it was just not to get into the streets. It would show the people in Washington that there's power in the streets. There's power in the people and what they want. So we have to organize. And the key thing, Angela, is you have to get a critical mass of people. And Dr. King was able to get that critical mass. Right now, we'll have sporadic protests. Dr. King never dealt with a protest. He dealt with a movement. A protest lasts for 10 days, and then something on you onto something else. So we teach you how to sustain and to get to the issue that you're dealing with, and how to mobilize from the top and also from the bottom, so that you have change and not just moving the furniture in the room. Because a lot of times we think we have change, and all the system did was just move the furniture around. So that's very, very important. But that political, making sure that you know who's in your neighborhood. You should know who's in your alder person on your state senate. And we always worry about the president, but the president is, you work with the people local in your area, school board members, because they represent your whole content. And you need to be going to school board members and asking people that run for school board, what is your platform? What are you going to do? That's the way the young people can help, because they can make a difference by talking to their parents about what is going on, and then make a decision when they get old enough to vote. But that voting is certainly important. And March the 5th, we're going back down to Selma to dedicate and commemorate what John Lewis and Dr. King and others did to get the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was really formed as like John Lewis said, marching from Selma to Montgomery. So that voting rights, and it's been diluted now. Our Congress and our Supreme Court is diluting that Voting Rights Act, and it's affecting us because it's putting obstacles for us to vote.
Yeah, and one of the things you were saying about children, having the opportunity to influence their parents, to be engaged, and not to leave those decisions, because the decisions we make today actually impact our children, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And it affects their future, because these teenagers in 5 years and 10 years, they're going to be looking for jobs, and they're going to be smelling all the environmental problems. So it's really them protecting their future. Absolutely. And then they get involved, and they can get involved. And we welcome. Dr. King always used youth. And as I travel the world, Angela, most social changes that came through young people, because older people had jobs, and they could be intimidated, because in the South, they would fire you from your job if you got involved. But the students were independent, and they didn't have to, be involved with that threat. So we need those young people. We need their minds and their thinking. Absolutely.
So I want to thank all of our students from joining us. We have Fern M Spruill who says thank you. Let us know where you're from, where you're joining us from. We are really happy to have Mr. Alphin here because he's giving us some great information from someone who's been a police officer, who's now a peace officer. So I got a comment from Annette Murray. She says, even if the vote doesn't go our way, we must speak up, write our lawmakers, and galvanize people, large or small.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we don't do. A politician once told me that 500 letters, Angela, from people will influence their thinking. 500 letters saying this issue, because most of the people, and I like to say, we need not only voter registration, we need voter education, because we need to know what the platform people, what they're doing, what they have done, and then we need to write letters. We need to make sure we know our congressperson, state, city council, board of education, state senators, and we need to write them and let them know that you live in or you represent us. When I go into a community, Angela, I can tell the people who are voting, because I can tell how the neighborhoods look. The trash is not picked up, the weeds are not cut. And Maynard Jackson told me that when you don't participate in voting, you get what you deserve, nothing. Maynard Jackson told me that long. So look at the neighborhoods. People who are participating in voting, they get better police service. We call it selective policing. When you go to people that just are not voting, et cetera, there's a different attitude in the police department. So it affects the whole community. So we have to make sure that we're voting. I'm working with a community now that only 35% of the people voted that are registered to vote. And that's horrible. That's horrific.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I have a comment from Chaplain Taylor. She says, good morning, I'm a chaplain, and my question is, if prayer was back in the schools, would we have such violence as we have in the school systems today?
Well, let me give you a response because I'm not a theologian, but I think that this philosophy is a value.
Yes.
And religion is a value. So when you have those values, my grandfather was a minister, and it put some guardrails on my behavior. I just didn't do everything. So I like to say that religion is a value. And I look at that when I go in the community to see what churches are there, what mosques, what synagogues are there, because that's a value. And that has a value that if you reinforce it, it begins to change your behavior. So therefore, I would say yes. And that's what we do in nonviolence. We teach values. And Dr. King said we need a revolution of values. He said that in 1960. And so our values have been corroded. The things we see on television, of how young people talk, the way they speak in front of their parents, in front of their teachers, that's a value that we need to take a look at, and we can change those values. So yes, I think that, and then I'll say that even atheists follow Dr. King, because this was not about religion, it was about spirituality. There's a difference between religion and spirituality. So even though you don't have a faith or you don't believe in that, atheists believe in the world, the balance in the universe. So they believe in something. So therefore, I would respond. I won't give you an answer, but I'll respond. I think yes, if we put that value of that religion and spirituality in those schools, I'm sure this will change and have a reduction.
And I think this nonviolence education that you talk about and that you're leading also gives us a platform on how to live our lives. And I think once we get that in our minds, it helps us to reduce some of these things that make us do things outside of our character. From Rita Kimball, she says, I would like to thank both of you for this information. Thank you, Rita. Thank you for your response. And we have time for another question. Rita is from Opa Losa, Louisiana. I think, did I pronounce that right? So she's from Louisiana, and we're very happy to have you here with us today. And I'm really excited that this information is going out all across the United States, and we have people listening from so many different areas. And I think it's also very important. Ashley Russell is here from Mobile, Alabama. Thank you, Ashley, for being here and receiving this this information. And then we have Yvonne Connor, Villa Rica, Georgia. She said, I'm among the older people now, volunteered locally in Cleveland, Ohio, and in Michigan years ago. Thank you, Yvonne, for your service and for your volunteer activism. So we have people from all over who are getting this information. How do people get involved? How do they begin this journey? You got a special invitation from Mrs. King. So how do we get a special invitation from you?
Well, prior to that invitation, when I met her in 81, they were having the training at the King Center once a year, the summer internship. And I was so excited, Angela, that I would come down. I came down here for 9 years from St. Louis. I would take my vacation from my police department. I'd come to the Institute of Training at the King Center in Atlanta. And based on that, that's how I evolved and was able to begin to absorb and get all the information about Dr. King and how it worked. And I would take it back to the police department. And I would actually try what I had learned that summer in the police department. And it works with narcotics, about, communities are full of narcotics, and how I was in homicide then, how to reduce the rates of homicide, because St. Louis is about the third highest killing in the nation. I've seen death so much, if I never see it again, mostly young African Americans that are killed in St. Louis. So I tried this philosophy, and all what Dr. King advocated, I've tried in the streets and around the world. So I'm not just talking theory. I'm talking about what I've done with gang members and guerrillas in Nigeria and South Africa and California. So this is something that actually works. How you get involved is, first of all, go on the King Center website and start reading that. And then when we have young activities like this, join in, because right now we're teaching all over the United States the beloved community Leadership Academy. And we've had this for 1 year, and we have people all over the world we're teaching. So there's all types of activity. And then we'd love to see you here. We'd love to see you during King Week, to come down to Atlanta, get your school to bring you down. And if you get in touch with me, I'll take you down and do a civil rights tour with Selma, Montgomery, Alabama. So there's all types of ways to get involved. But the King Center network, on the network, is the best to look and see what programs they're offering, and then just tie in and listen to them, and then get involved.
And I'd like to tell you, we have a viewer all the way from England. Isn't that exciting? Someone from England.
Wow.
So this influence and this program is going out all across not only the United States, but across the world. So as you said, we want you to check out all of the youth programs and teaching resources at www.thekingcenter.org. Thekingcenter.org, if you would like to have more information.
Now, Andrew, we just finished a course. Dr. Bernice King is the CEO of the King Center. That's Mrs. King's youngest daughter, Bernice. And we just finished a course online where you could look online and you can get this. And it's about an 18-hour course, and it takes you through the whole philosophy and answers questions, and will give you people who have used this to further explain it. So that's an e-course, communications course that's online that you can get from the King Center. So there's all types of ways. But before I forget, I want to make sure we understand this word love, because Dr. King, when she was talking, she has be love. And I thought love, when I first heard it, was, sentimental and touchy-feely, not one of the parts of it. But Dr. King went to the Greek New Testament, and there's 3 definitions of love. The first definition is what they call eros. Eros is erotic love. I love my mate, my partner, my wife. That's erotic. That's a romantic love. Philia is a reciprocal love. It's friendship. I love you because you love me. You're my friend. That's philia, like Philadelphia. But what Dr. King was talking about in nonviolent agape love. Agape love is unconditional. It's not motivated by what you do to me. Whatever you do to me, I'm going to still love you. And wow, Angela, I had to practice on that. I was in homicide, and people that had done hideous things, I had to say, I dislike what you did as a person in action, but I still love you. And that's something you have to get inside yourself and practice and make sure you understand what that love is, a much deeper love. So sometimes people get that agape love mixed up with romantic love. I just wanted to make clear of that.
So what do you want those who are listening to us today to do after they get off this program, after they're no longer listening to the two of us? How do you want them to proceed with their lives, perhaps for the next 30 days? I think one of our persons in the audience asked that question. What can they do for the next 30 days after?
Well, I would say two things. Number one, make a survey of how you talk to people, say for a week. Just don't say anything to the person, just write it down. Make a survey of how you talk to your parents. How do you talk to your siblings and the friends and the teachers? And just see how you act. Because a lot of times we don't think we're violent until we really begin to write down what we say with our tongue. Because once you say it with your tongue, you can't take it back. So just take a survey, just a soft survey of how you relate to people when somebody steps in front of you in front of the store. What do you say to them? Or the cashier didn't give you your change back right. So just take a quick survey of yourself, and then go into the King Center network and begin to read about Dr. King, how he responded when people were violent to him, and how he was able to negotiate that contact and de-escalate it where it did not rise to violence, because there's a difference in conflict and violence. And so we say we want to make sure you can manage conflict so it does not escalate to violence. So I want them to look at all the things that they do in that period and how it relates to violence, how they talk, how they think, how they act, and just write it down. And at the end of the week, look at it. And then go on the King Center Network and take a video and look at Dr. King in Selma, Birmingham, and begin to read what he says about his whole thinking. Because what we're trying to do is you change your thinking, you change your actions. And everything begins with a thought. So therefore, we want to change what you're thinking about, because if you change that, you'll change your actions. That would be my best suggestion. And stay with the King Center Network.
Yeah, and they can visit the kingcenterinstitute.org to learn more about nonviolence. So please make an opportunity to be a part of this exercise that Mr. Alphin just gave us. And I think it's a wonderful exercise, and I'm going to do it myself to make sure that I am being nonviolent in my approach. So we have time for one more question. So hope it will be one of you, one of our students who is really interested in asking a question about anything that you want to ask Mr. Alphin about. One of the things that I guess I do want to ask, as we look at what has happened in Michigan at colleges and in our schools, what can our children do? What can our students do mentally or any kind of way to just keep them safe?
And that's an excellent question, because as I talk to young people and visit schools, they're traumatized. And I felt so disheartened that those young people in Michigan, those young people were crying and hugging each other. And that fear of traumatized, they're walking in trauma, and they're traumatized. And they're saying, I don't know if I'm going to come home from school, and all those things are sitting in school. So first thing I'd say is to follow the instructions of your institution. Follow the instructions. Make sure you understand what needs to happen, because nonviolence says, I want to be proactive. And then we need to mobilize. I think people are still in school, in the streets now, and also in Washington, to get some control on all these guns that we have in the United States. We did have, when I was 10 years ago, they had a ban on assault weapons, so it can be done. One party said no, and now all the assault weapons are out there. But for 10 years, they had a ban on assault weapons. So therefore, I want you to get involved and ask in your school, ask in your church, what are we doing about gun violence? Because 100 people in the United States, 100 people every day are killed with gun violence, either suicide or gunshot, gun wounds. So we need to make sure that we're participating and joining groups, because a lot of groups are working in your community to reduce that gun violence, because those guns won't stop killing, but they'll make it not so accessible where you have to think before you start killing people. With a gun, you just pull the trigger. So I think, first of all, as a person working in homicide and the police department, our officers are outmanned, outgunned, because there's so many guns on the street, and that produces a fear for them. And sometimes they may act quicker than they would because they're fearful of the people that are carrying guns. Well, everybody's carrying guns. So we need to work on that, on the gun control first, and see who in your community. Talk to your center. What are they doing? Ask your people who represent you. What are they doing about school violence? And then get involved with somebody in that community that's working on what you want to work on, an issue that you're working on. And I think the more we do that, the political system will change, because politicians follow the will of the people. But we've got to get their attention that we care about this. And I would share last figures I saw, Angela. I think about 75 or 80% of the people in the United States wanted some control on guns, some gun checks. So it's the people's will that has to be expressed to the politicians.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, we talked a bit earlier about letter writing, and that is something our young people can very well write about and talk about their emotions and how just learning about. I mean, I don't know. I've seen these television reports, and you see the violence there, and it is so heart-wrenching.
Yes,
And I think
absolutely.
we really have to speak up, and our young people have an opportunity to do that. So I want to thank you so much for thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I want all of those who listen to visit the KingCenterInstitute.org to learn more about nonviolence, to go to the website and find out about all of the programs that are being offered, and just take opportunities to get to know more. But I just say, please take charge of your thoughts and your mind, and let's see how violent we are by doing the exercise that Mr. Alphin has given us to do. So now we're going to go to a video, NV365, to learn more about nonviolence. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. Man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. changed the world when he demonstrated what could be achieved through nonviolence. Now, you can learn how to live and practice this philosophy yourself through Nonviolence 365 Online, an innovative digital experience developed by the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. Nonviolence 365 Online features extensive video interviews with real nonviolence practitioners, including the King Center CEO, Dr. Bernice A. King, King Center certified instructors and trainers, and veterans of the civil rights movement. Explorations of the historic campaigns that helped Dr. King forge his philosophy. Immersive, annotated reading experiences that enhance Dr. King's most influential writings on nonviolence. Custom activities, including quizzes and interactive scenarios to help you practice along the way. Real-world exercises to help you start applying nonviolence in your daily life. Nonviolence 365 is a love-centered way of thinking, speaking, engaging, and acting that leads to personal, cultural, and societal transformation. It isn't just a concept for philosophers or political leaders. Nonviolence 365 is a powerful, practical approach to dealing with conflict and dismantling injustice. Whether it's in your personal life, in your school or workplace, your local community, or a national movement. Dr. King, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and many others sought to create the beloved community, a society built on global cooperation and equity. This wasn't a lofty utopian dream. It's a realistic and achievable goal because each and every one of us has the power to make it happen by committing to nonviolence as a way of life. Take the first step today with Nonviolence 365 Online.
Wow, what a great conversation we had today. On behalf of Dr. Bernice A. King, the CEO of the King Center, and the entire staff, we'd like to thank the students as well as the teachers for participating in this event. This is a worthy event, and it is one way that we are trying to keep Dr. King's vision alive. Nonviolence 365 is a way of life, and it's a way that you can be a part of making this beloved community what we want it to be. Nonviolent 365, we have education that will get you to where you want to go. It is a just way in making a difference. It is a way that we can transform. It's transformation. And as Dr. Charles told us today, you can make a difference by getting involved. One way you can get involved is to join us in the challenge, the Be Loved Community Challenge. Go to our www.thekingcenter and check out the pledge and join us in making this world a better place. Also, teachers, one way you can help is to take the survey. We have a survey that you can give us feedback to make this program even better than what it is now. It's all about making a difference in our community. As well as that, we ask you to join us at the King Center in person. We have programs that we are offering there on site. Check out our website and you can find out all about it. But the most important thing is to get involved. Thank you again for joining us during this Black History Month and doing this special presentation. Dr. Charles, Ms. Rice, thank you for participating. Without you, this could not be possible. Once again, will you join me in a round of applause for a job well done for our moderator as well as our panelists? Thank you.